Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Daniel pushed the garage door open with his shoulder, holding the bag of coal. The noise of the barbecue laughter, clinking bottles, snatches of conversation came from the backyard. He was about to leave when Claire's voice made him freeze. She stood at the kitchen window, just a couple of meters away, and talked to Leela. The window was slightly open, and her words came out clearly, as if they were intended for him. "I don't love him anymore, Leela," Claire said. The voice was quiet but firm. "I don't know when it happened, but that's it." Daniel froze. The bag of coal pulled at his hands, but he did not move. Leela said something, too quietly to make out, but Claire continued. "It's not that I'm evil or that he did something terrible. There's just nothing left. I look at him and I feel empty." Daniel felt the blood pounding in his temples. He wanted to cough, drop the coal, let him know that he was here, but his feet seemed rooted to the floor. Leela spoke louder. "Claire, are you sure? You've been together for so many years. Maybe it's just a phase. We all have moments like this." "No," Claire snapped. "This is not a phase. I tried Leela. I tried to feel something. But every time he's around, all I can think about is..." "God, Claire, are you serious? Did you tell him?" "No, and I don't intend to," Claire replied. "For what? So that he starts to panic and make a scene. I don't want any drama. I just want, I don't know, peace, perhaps." Daniel slowly lowered the bag to the floor. He couldn't listen anymore. He stepped to the door, trying not to make noise, and went out into the yard. The sun was shining in the eyes, the guests were chatting, someone was laughing at the grill. He forced a smile when his neighbor, Bob, waved to him. "Hey Dan, where's the coal? We're already starving here," Bob shouted, holding the meat tongs. "I'm already carrying it," Daniel answered. His voice sounded even, although everything was boiling inside. He picked up the bag, placed it by the grill, and began to light the fire. The hands moved automatically, but Claire's words were spinning in her head. "I don't love him anymore. I'm empty." Claire came out of the house a couple of minutes later, holding a tray of vegetables. She smiled at the guests, her blonde hair glistening in the sun. She looked as always confident, charming. Daniel looked at her, trying to find any hint of what she had just said. But her smile was the same as always when she played the role of the ideal housewife. "Dan, is everything okay with the grill?" she asked, putting the tray on the table. "Yes, it's about to flare up," he answered, without looking into her eyes. He didn't want her to notice how his voice wavered. "Great," she said, and turned to Leela, who followed him out. "Leela, tell everyone about the exhibition you were talking about." Daniel busied himself with the coals, listening to Leela talk enthusiastically about some gallery in the city center. Claire laughed, agreed, and no one would have thought that 5 minutes ago she admitted that her marriage was dead. He felt like a stranger at this holiday, as if he was looking at his life from the outside. The barbecue went on as usual. The guests ate, drank, and joked. Daniel kept up the conversation when spoken to, but he kept finding himself watching Claire. She was chatting with her neighbor, Marge, about her new gardening project and seemed genuinely interested. But now Daniel noticed little things he hadn't seen before. The way she looked away when he got closer, the way her laugh sounded a little harsher than necessary. "Dan, are you okay?" asked Mark, their old friend, approaching with a beer in his hand. "You look like you're counting taxes in your head." Daniel forced out a chuckle. "I was just thinking. Everything is fine." "Well, look, if anything happens, call him for a beer," Mark said, slapping him on the shoulder, and walked away to the group at the table. Daniel nodded, but Mark's words didn't affect him. He thought about Claire. How long has she felt this emptiness? Why didn't he notice? They had been married for 12 years, and he had always considered their marriage strong. Not ideal, of course, who has it ideal, but reliable. They paid the mortgage together, went on vacation, argued about what movie to watch. Isn't that enough? He remembered how Claire came home late a couple of weeks ago. She said that she was late with the client, discussing the project. He believed, didn't ask questions. Now he wondered, what if that wasn't entirely true? He didn't want to suspect her of cheating, but the words, "I'm empty," burned him from the inside. By evening, the guests began to leave. Claire said goodbye to everyone, hugging them, thanking them for coming. Daniel was putting away the dishes when she approached. "It was a good evening, right?" she said, drying her hands with a towel. "Yeah, everyone's happy," he replied, putting the plates in the sink. "You're kind of quiet today," she remarked, looking at him. Her voice was light, but there was a sense of wariness in it. "I'm just tired," he said. "Work, you know." "Well, rest tomorrow," she answered and went into the living room, leaving him alone. Daniel looked after her. He wanted to ask, "What did you mean when you said you didn't love me?" But he couldn't. Not here, not now. He started washing the dishes instead, hearing her turn on the TV in the other room. At night, he lay in bed, looking at the ceiling. Claire slept next to him, her breathing even. He recalled their early years, how they laughed at stupid jokes, how she got angry when he left socks on the floor, how they dreamed about the future. Where did it all go? He turned to her, but did not wake her. Instead, he stood up, went down to his office, and took out an old notebook from his drawer. On the first page, he wrote, "She said she doesn't love me. I don't know what to do." In the morning, Claire behaved as usual. I made coffee and chatted about my plans for the day. She mentioned that she would meet with a client after lunch. "Will you be late again?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Maybe not for long," she answered without looking at him. "The project is complex. Everything needs to be discussed." "I see," he said and left for work. In the office, he sat at his desk, looking at tables, but couldn't concentrate. A colleague, Steve, looked into his cubicle. "Dan, you're like a zombie today." "What, was there a party yesterday?" Steve joked. "Yeah, sort of," Daniel replied, forcing himself to smile. "Well, hold on. If anything, the coffee in the break room is fresh," Steve said and left. Daniel opened his browser and typed in signs that a marriage is falling apart. Articles came out one after another: lack of communication, emotional distance, irritation. He read and felt how everything coincided. Claire didn't yell at him or make a scene, but she was somewhere else, not with him. In the evening, he returned home. Claire wasn't there yet. He sat down on the sofa, opened his notebook, and wrote, "She doesn't look me in the eyes. I don't know how long it lasts." He wondered what would happen next. Should he tell her what he heard, pretending that everything is fine? He didn't know the answer. But Claire's words couldn't leave his head, and he felt something inside him breaking. Daniel woke up early, before the alarm clock. Claire slept next to him, facing the wall. He looked at her back, waiting for her to move, but she didn't move. He stood up, trying not to make any noise, and went down to the kitchen. The coffee maker was already programmed, a habit Claire had always appreciated. But now even that seemed like an empty gesture, as if she was doing it automatically. He poured himself some coffee and sat down at the table. Claire's words yesterday, "I don't love him anymore," sounded in my head like a broken record. He took the notepad out of his pocket and opened it. On the first page, there was only one sentence, written at night. "She said she didn't love me. I don't know what to do." He took the pen and added, "She didn't look at me this morning. I'm not sure if she's done this before." Claire came down half an hour later, already dressed for work. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she looked tired. "Good morning," she said, pouring herself some coffee. "Good," Daniel answered, looking into the mug. He waited for her to ask how he slept or say something else, but she was silent. "I have a meeting with a client downtown today," Claire said, opening the refrigerator. "Maybe I'll be late." "Again?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice even. "Yes, it's a big project," she answered, taking out the yogurt. "They want to redo everything. I'll have to sit." "I see," he said. He wanted to ask who this client was, but didn't. Instead, he stood up and put the mug in the sink. I went to work. "See you in the evening," Claire said, not looking up from the phone. Daniel nodded and left. In the car, he turned on the radio, but the words of the presenter made it difficult to think. He turned it off and drove in silence. At work, he sat down at the computer and opened the tables that needed to be checked. But my thoughts were not about numbers. He remembered how Claire had been acting in recent months. She often worked late and said that clients demanded urgent edits. He didn't doubt her then. Now he wasn't so sure. "Hey, Dan, are you with us?" The voice of Steve, his colleague, pulled him out of his thoughts. Steve stood at his desk, holding a folder. "Oh, yes, what is it?" Daniel asked, trying to concentrate. "Meeting in 10 minutes. Are you ready?" Steve nodded at the screen. "These reports are needed today." "Yes, almost finished," Daniel lied. He didn't have time to do anything. "Okay, don't let me down," Steve said and left. Daniel opened the file and began to work, but his thoughts kept returning to Claire. He remembered how she canceled their dinner at a restaurant a couple of weeks ago. She said that the client had made an urgent appointment. He then shrugged and ordered pizza home. Why didn't he ask more? Why didn't he even notice that something was wrong? At lunch, he went to the break room, where several colleagues were discussing the news. He took the coffee and sat to the side, listening to their conversation. "Have you heard about Brandon's new client?" asked one of the analysts, Jack. "They say they are ready to invest millions." "Yeah, but he's already annoying everyone with his edits," answered another, Keith. "Brandon sat until midnight yesterday." Daniel thought about Claire. Maybe her clients are like that too. Maybe she's really just busy. But the words, "I'm empty," haunted me. He took out his phone and opened their chat. The last message from Claire was yesterday. "Buy charcoal for the barbecue." Nothing personal, nothing warm. He started texting, "Will you be home for dinner?" but erased it. Why ask if he already knows the answer? In the evening, he returned home around 6. Claire wasn't there yet. He made himself a sandwich and sat down on the sofa. The TV was turned off, and the silence in the house was oppressive. He took out a notepad and wrote, "She didn't ask how my day was. I don't remember the last time she asked." Claire returned around 9. She walked in, leaving her bag at the door, looking annoyed. "Long day?" Daniel asked as she walked into the kitchen. "Yes, a nightmare," she answered, opening a bottle of water. "The client wants to redo everything. Again. Maybe you can tell me?" he suggested. He wanted to hear more, to understand what was happening. "Not now, Dan, I'm exhausted," she said, shaking her head. "I just want a shower and sleep." "Okay," he said, feeling something tighten in his chest. He watched her go upstairs and thought, when did we stop talking? The next day, everything happened again. Claire left early, saying she had another meeting. Daniel was left alone at breakfast. He opened his notebook and wrote, "I am becoming invisible. She doesn't see me even when I'm nearby." He wondered how long this would last. Months? Year? He remembered their last trip to Colorado last summer. They went hiking and took pictures by the lake. She then laughed and held his hand. Or was it just in his memory? At work, he was distracted again. Steve noticed this in a meeting. "Dan, where are you?" he asked when Daniel missed his boss's question. "Sorry, I was lost in thought," Daniel answered, forcing himself to smile. "Repeat, please." "Quarterly reports," said the boss, Richard. "Are you finished?" "Almost. I'll send it today," Daniel said, although he knew that he was behind. After the meeting, Steve approached him. "Seriously, what's wrong with you? It's like you're not here." "I'm just tired," Daniel replied. "It's okay." "Well, if anything, speak up," Steve said and left. Daniel returned to the table and opened his browser. He typed, "How to understand that a marriage is ending." Articles appeared immediately. 10 signs that your partner is moving away. Why people lose love. He read, and each point was like a blow. Less communication, less touching, more time outside the home. He closed the tab, feeling his throat tighten. In the evening, Claire was late again. She entered the house at about 10, saying, "Sorry, the client delayed everything again." Daniel was sitting on the couch with a notepad. "Do you want to eat?" "I left you some pasta," he said. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry," she replied, taking off her shoes. "I'll go to bed." "Claire," he began, not knowing what he wanted to say. "Can we talk?" "About what?" she asked, stopping. Her voice was tired, almost irritated. "Just about us," he said. "I feel like we hardly see each other." She sighed. "Dan, I'm really tired. Let's not today, okay?" "Okay," he said, watching her leave. He opened his notebook and wrote, "She doesn't want to talk. I don't know how to reach her." The next days were the same. Claire left early and returned late. Daniel tried to start a conversation, but she brushed it off. "Not now. I'm busy. Let's do it later." He noticed how she avoided his gaze, how her smile became strained when he was near. He wrote in a notebook. I asked how her day was. She answered in one word, "I don't know what else to do." At work, he plunged into a routine, but even there he could not escape. Colleagues' jokes, discussed plans for the weekend, and he felt cut off from their world. One day Kate, an analyst, asked, "Dan, are you going to Steve's party on Saturday?" "I don't know, we'll see," he answered. He didn't want to go anywhere. He wanted to understand what was happening to his marriage. On Friday evening, Claire returned early, around 8. She looked a little more cheerful. "Good news," she said, sitting down on the sofa. "The client finally approved the design. Maybe it will be easier now." "Great," Daniel said, trying to smile. "Maybe we should celebrate." "Maybe," she answered, but her voice was unenthusiastic. "I'm really exhausted, though." "Claire," he began again, "I'm serious. Can we talk? I feel like we're moving away." She looked at him, and for a second he thought she would say something important. But then she shook her head. "Dan, it's okay. Just work, stress." "Don't make things up," she said and stood up. "I'll go take a shower." He looked after her, feeling the words get stuck in his throat. He opened his notebook and wrote, "She said everything was fine, but I know it's not so." By the end of the week, he felt like he was losing himself. He went to work, returned home, but everything seemed empty. Claire was there, but she wasn't there. He remembered her words to Leela, "I'm empty." Now he himself felt this emptiness. He wrote in a notebook, "I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am to myself." Daniel parked at the cafe on the corner where he usually got coffee before work. It was Tuesday morning, and he decided to stop by for a latte to somehow shake things up. The last few days had been difficult. Claire's words overheard at the barbecue haunted her, and her coldness at home only increased her anxiety. He got out of the car, straightened his shirt collar, and headed towards the entrance. The cafe was crowded inside, but not noisy. People at the tables were working on laptops or chatting. Daniel stood in line, looking at the menu above the register, when out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a familiar figure at the window. Claire. She was sitting at a table with a man in a dark suit. They laughed, and her smile was more vibrant than Daniel had seen in a long time. He froze, feeling his heart clench. "Sir, what is your order?" the barista asked, snapping him out of his daze. Big latte," he said, not taking his eyes off Claire. "No sugar." "Name?" the barista clarified. "Daniel," he answered and walked away to the delivery counter, trying not to look in Claire's direction, but couldn't resist. She leaned towards the man, showing something on her tablet, and he nodded, smiling. Daniel felt a pang in his chest, not quite jealousy, but something close. He didn't think she was cheating, but her ease with this man, her laughter, was something she hadn't given him for months. "Latte for Daniel," the barista shouted. He took the glass and turned to leave, but Claire noticed him. Her smile wavered, but she quickly waved her hand. "Dan," she called, and her voice sounded surprised, but not guilty. "Come here." Daniel hesitated, but approached. The man in the suit looked up, his face open, almost friendly. "Hi," Daniel said, stopping at the table. He held the coffee in his hand like a shield. "This is Ethan, Claire said, nodding at the man. My client. Ethan, this is Daniel, my husband. Nice to meet you, Ethan said, extending his hand. He had a slight accent, maybe New York. Claire told me about you. Is it true? Daniel asked, shaking his hand. He looked at Claire, but she was already scrolling through something on her tablet. What did you tell me? Oh, what a grill master you are, Ethan said with a smile. She mentioned your barbecue. He says you fed everyone. Daniel forced himself to nod. Yeah, it happened. Sit down, Dan, Claire said, moving a chair. We're just discussing the project. I'll be a minute, he replied. I have to go to work. Well, at least for a second, she insisted, and there was something artificial in her voice, as if she wanted to show that everything was fine. Daniel sat down, feeling out of place. Ethan started talking about the project, something about rebranding the company, logos, timelines. Claire nodded and added her comments, but Daniel was barely listening. He looked at her. The way she leaned towards Ethan, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about design. It was Claire, whom he knew before, lively, enthusiastic, but not with him. Dan, are you okay? Claire asked, noticing his silence. Yes, just thinking about work, he replied, taking a sip of coffee. Everything is serious here, right? Yeah, Ethan said. Claire is saving us. Without it, we would be drowned in the old style. He's exaggerating, Claire said, but her smile was pleased. I'm just doing my job. Daniel nodded, but everything was boiling inside. He didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to look stupid, but her ease with Ethan cut. He stood up. Okay, I have to go, he said. See you at home. Okay, see you this evening, Claire answered, and her voice was the same as always, neutral, without warmth. It was nice to meet you, Daniel, Ethan said, smiling again. Mutually, Daniel answered and left without looking back. He sat in the car for a minute without starting the engine. The coffee was cooling in my hand. He remembered her laugh, her gaze directed at Ethan. It didn't look like cheating, he didn't see anything that screamed about it. But she shared something with Ethan that she didn't give him. Energy, attention, yourself. He took a notepad out of his pocket and wrote, She laughed with him the way she doesn't laugh with me. I don't know what that means. He tried to concentrate at work, but the scene in the cafe was spinning in his head. Steve entered his cabin with another joke. Dan, you're like a zombie again, he said, sitting down on the edge of the table. What, Claire didn't let you go last night? Daniel forced a smile. Yeah, something like that. Lucky you, Steve said, laughing. Okay, are the reports ready? Richard is already breathing down his neck. Almost, Daniel replied. I'll finish today. Come on, don't let me down, Steve said and left. Daniel opened the file, but his thoughts weren't on work. He remembered Claire talking about Ethan earlier. A difficult but interesting client, that's how she described him. Then he did not attach any importance to it. Now he wondered, how much time was she spending with this Ethan, and why is she so alive with him, but empty at home? At lunchtime, he went to the lounge where Kate and Jack were discussing plans for the weekend. Dan, are you and Claire going out somewhere? Kate asked, pouring herself some coffee. I don't know, he answered. She's busy with projects. Oh, those designers, Jack said, shaking his head. My sister is also always with clients. Sometimes he sits until midnight. Daniel nodded, but Jack's words did not calm him down. He returned to the table and opened his browser. I typed, How to understand that your partner is emotionally distant. The article said the same things he had already read. Less communication, less warmth, more time with others. He closed the tab, feeling his throat tighten. In the evening, he returned home first. Claire arrived around 9, leaving her bag at the door. Hello, she said, taking off her coat. How is the day? Okay, Daniel answered, sitting on the couch. And yours? Crazy, she said, going into the kitchen. Ethan is redoing everything again. But it seems we have found a common language. Ethan, Daniel repeated, trying not to let his voice give him away. The one with whom you were in the cafe. Yeah, she answered, pouring water. He's normal, just demanding. You looked like you were having fun, Daniel said, looking at her. Claire stopped and looked at him. Well, sometimes you have to laugh so as not to go crazy from work. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, he said, but everything tightened inside. He wanted to ask more, but didn't know how. Instead, he stood up. I prepared dinner. Want? Thank you, but I ate in the office, she replied. I'll go take a shower. Daniel watched her leave and felt something break. He took out a notepad and wrote, She says it doesn't mean anything, but I saw her eyes. She was there with him, not with me. The next day, Claire left early again. Daniel remained at breakfast, staring at the empty chair. He remembered their conversations, their lives. When did she stop being with him? He wrote in a notebook, I don't know how to get her back. I don't know if I want to. At work, he was even more distracted. Richard called him after lunch. Daniel, what's wrong with you? He asked, sitting at the table. You're behind on your reports. This doesn't sound like you. Sorry, Daniel said. Personal matters. I'll fix everything. I hope so, said Richard. You are one of the best, but now you are not in business. Figure it out. Yes, sir, Daniel replied and returned to the table. He felt guilty, but not for his work. He blamed himself for not noticing Claire sneak away. That evening, Claire returned late. She looked tired, but not irritated. Ethan finally signed the design, she said, sitting down on the sofa. God bless. Congratulations, Daniel said, but his voice was empty. Thank you, she replied, looking at him. Dan, are you okay? You are somehow. Not like that. I'm just tired, he said. Job. Well, rest, she said and turned on the TV. Daniel looked at her, feeling the distance between them growing. He wrote in a notebook, She is not mine. I don't know if she was ever mine. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his laptop screen. It was Saturday morning. Claire had left for another meeting with a client, and the house was empty. He opened his browser and typed, What you need to know about divorce in Pennsylvania. Articles came out one after another, division of property, alimony, legal steps. He read, feeling how cold everything inside was. Claire's words, I don't love him anymore, sounded like an echo in my head, and her laughter with Ethan in the cafe only intensified the pain. He didn't want to believe it was all over, but he couldn't ignore the truth. He took the notepad out of his pocket and opened it. The last entry read, She is not mine. I don't know if she was ever mine. He took a pen and wrote, I don't want drama, but I can't pretend nothing is happening. He scrolled through the articles until he came across the name of a lawyer, Karen Wilson, who specialized in divorce. Her website promised confidentiality and support. Daniel wrote down her number and closed the laptop. He wasn't ready to call, but the thought that he had a plan was reassuring. Claire returned home around 3 in the afternoon. She looked tired, but not irritated as usual. Hi, she said, throwing her bag on the sofa. Are you at home all day? Yeah, Daniel answered, sitting with his coffee. I decided to rest. Okay, she said, going into the kitchen. I'm hungry. Is there anything else? There's pasta in the refrigerator, he answered. I cooked yesterday. Thank you, she shouted from the kitchen. A minute later, she returned with a plate and sat down opposite. Ethan was surprisingly cooperative today. It seems the project is finally moving forward. Great, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice neutral. The mention of Ethan stung again, but he didn't show it. So less stress? I hope so, she replied, looking at her plate. Although with clients you never know. Daniel nodded but didn't continue. He wanted to ask how many more meetings with Ethan, but instead he said, Are you okay? You're kind of distant. Claire looked at him, her eyebrows raised slightly. Dan, I'm just busy. You know how it goes. I know, he said, but we hardly talk. I mean for real. She sighed, putting her fork down. Dan, it's okay. There's just a lot of work. Don't start, okay? Okay, he said, feeling his throat tighten. He got up and went into the office, leaving her at the table. In the office, he opened a notepad and wrote, She doesn't want to talk. I don't know how to reach her. On Monday morning, Daniel called Karen Wilson. He made it home from work, closing his cubicle door so no one would hear. Karen Wilson's office, a female voice answered. "Hello, this is Daniel Harper," he said, trying to speak quietly. "I would like to make an appointment for a consultation." "Of course," the woman answered. "What are we talking about?" "About divorce," he said, and the words sounded heavier than he expected. "I just want to understand what my options are." "Okay," she said. "Miss Wilson is free tomorrow at 2. Is it right for you?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "Thank you." He hung up and felt his palms sweat. He didn't tell anyone, not his friends, not his colleagues. Even the thought of telling Mark seemed impossible. He opened his notepad and wrote, "I called the lawyer. This is real. I don't know if I'm ready." At work, he tried to look normal, but Steve noticed his absent-mindedness. "Dan, you're hovering somewhere again," he said, entering the cabin. "What, Claire has completely driven you away?" "Yeah," Daniel replied, forcing a smile. "There's just a lot to do." "Well, hold on," Steve said, slapping him on the shoulder. "If anything, call me for a beer." "Okay," Daniel said, but he knew he wouldn't call. He didn't want to talk about Claire, didn't want to explain that his marriage was falling apart. That evening, Claire returned late, around 10. She entered, saying, "Ethan has turned everything upside down again. We'll have to redo it." Daniel was sitting on the couch with a notepad. "Dinner is in the refrigerator," he said without looking at her. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry," she replied, taking off her shoes. "I'll go to bed." "Claire," he began, closing the notebook. "Can we talk? Seriously." She stopped and looked at him. "Dan, I'm tired. Let's do it tomorrow, okay?" "You always say that," he said, and his voice was firmer than he expected. "Every time I try, you brush me off." "God, Dan, what do you want?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I'm working. I'm exhausted. What should I do?" "Just talk to me," he said. "I feel like you're not here. You're somewhere else." She rolled her eyes. "Dan, you're exaggerating. Everything is fine. Just give me some space, okay?" "Okay," he said, feeling something inside him breaking. He watched her go upstairs and wrote in his notebook, "She wants space. I don't know what that means." The next day, he left work early, saying he had a meeting. Karen's office was in the city center, in a small building. Karen turned out to be a woman of about 50, with short gray hair and a calm voice. "Mr. Harper, good to see you," she said, pointing to the chair. "Tell me what brought you here." Daniel sat down, feeling awkward. "I'm thinking about divorce. My wife. She said she doesn't love me anymore. I heard it by chance." "I see," Karen said, making a note. "Have you talked to her about this?" "No," he answered. "I don't know how. She doesn't want to talk. She's always busy, always somewhere else." "Okay," Karen said. "Let's start with the basics. In Pennsylvania, divorce can be by mutual consent or fault. Judging by what you say, you are not yet ready for an open conversation. This is fine, but you need to prepare." "How?" asked Daniel. "First, finances," she said. "Collect information, bills, mortgage, savings. If it comes to the division of property, this will be important. Secondly, think about what you want. House, assets, custody if there are children." "There are no children," Daniel said. "Only the house. And I don't know what I want. I just don't want everything to fall apart." "I understand," Karen said. "But if she is already emotionally out of the marriage, you need to be prepared. Start small. Open a separate account, just to be on the safe side, and keep watching. If you are not ready to talk, gather information." "Okay," Daniel said. "I can do it." "And one more thing," Karen added. "Don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. People change, feelings go away. Your job is to protect yourself." "Thank you," he said, feeling her words lighten the weight a little. He left the office feeling strange. He didn't tell Claire he was going to see a lawyer, and that felt like a betrayal. But her words, "I'm empty," were a real betrayal. He got into the car and wrote on a notepad, "I spoke with a lawyer. She's already left. I'm just the last one to know. That evening, Claire returned home around 8. She looked pleased, almost cheerful. Ethan signed the layout, she said, sitting down on the sofa. Finally. Congratulations, Daniel said, but his voice was empty. Thank you, she replied, looking at him. Dan, are you okay? You're kind of tense. Just work, he lied. Lots of things to do. Well, rest, she said and turned on the TV. Daniel looked at her, feeling the distance between them growing. He didn't want to be the one who hides, who is silent. But he didn't know how to start a conversation without ruining everything. He opened his notepad and wrote, I'm getting ready. I don't know why, but I can't just wait. The next day, he went to the bank during lunch and opened a separate account, as Karen had advised. He transferred some money, there not enough for Claire to notice, but enough to make him feel safer. He didn't tell anyone, not even Mark, although he wrote to him asking him to meet. Hey Dan, how are you? Was the message. We haven't hung out for a long time. It's okay, Daniel replied. Maybe next week? Agreed, Mark wrote. Daniel felt guilty for lying, but couldn't speak. Not now. He returned home and Claire was already there, which was rare. You're early, he said, entering the kitchen. Yet Ethan let me go early, she replied, preparing the salad. Want? No, thank you, he said. I'll eat later. Okay, she said, and her voice was light, as if nothing was happening. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his laptop screen. It was Saturday morning. Claire had left for another meeting with a client, and the house was empty. He opened his browser and typed, "What you need to know about divorce in Pennsylvania." Articles came out one after another, division of property, alimony, legal steps. He read, feeling how cold everything inside was. Claire's words, "I don't love him anymore," sounded like an echo in my head, and her laughter with Ethan in the cafe only intensified the pain. He didn't want to believe it was all over, but he couldn't ignore the truth. He took the notepad out of his pocket and opened it. The last entry read, "She is not mine. I don't know if she was ever mine." He took a pen and wrote, "I don't want drama, but I can't pretend nothing is happening." He scrolled through the articles until he came across the name of a lawyer, Karen Wilson, who specialized in divorce. Her website promised confidentiality and support. Daniel wrote down her number and closed the laptop. He wasn't ready to call, but the thought that he had a plan was reassuring. Claire returned home around 3 in the afternoon. She looked tired, but not irritated as usual. "Hi," she said, throwing her bag on the sofa. "Are you at home all day?" "Yeah," Daniel answered, sitting with his coffee. "I decided to rest." "Okay," she said, going into the kitchen. "I'm hungry. Is there anything else?" "There's pasta in the refrigerator," he answered. "I cooked yesterday." "Thank you," she shouted from the kitchen. A minute later, she returned with a plate and sat down opposite. Ethan was surprisingly cooperative today. It seems the project is finally moving forward. "Great," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice neutral. The mention of Ethan stung again, but he didn't show it. "So less stress." "I hope so," she replied, looking at her plate. "Although with clients you never know." Daniel nodded but didn't continue. He wanted to ask how many more meetings with Ethan, but instead he said, "Are you okay? You're kind of distant." Claire looked at him, her eyebrows raised slightly. "Dan, I'm just busy. You know how it goes." "I know," he said, "but we hardly talk. I mean for real." She sighed, putting her fork down. "Dan, it's okay. There's just a lot of work. Don't start, okay?" "Okay," he said, feeling his throat tighten. He got up and went into the office, leaving her at the table. In the office, he opened a notepad and wrote, "She doesn't want to talk. I don't know how to reach her." On Monday morning, Daniel called Karen Wilson. He made it home from work, closing his cubicle door so no one would hear. Karen Wilson's office, a female voice answered. "Hello, this is Daniel Harper," he said, trying to speak quietly. "I would like to make an appointment for a consultation." "Of course," the woman answered. "What are we talking about?" "About divorce," he said. and the words sounded heavier than he expected. I just want to understand what my options are. Okay, she said. Miss Wilson is free tomorrow at 2. Is it right for you? Yes, Daniel replied. Thank you. He hung up and felt his palms sweat. He didn't tell anyone, not his friends, not his colleagues. Even the thought of telling Mark seemed impossible. He opened his notepad and wrote, I called the lawyer. This is real. I don't know if I'm ready. At work, he tried to look normal, but Steve noticed his absent-mindedness. Dan, you're hovering somewhere again, he said, entering the cabin. What, Claire has completely driven you away? Yeah, Daniel replied, forcing a smile. There's just a lot to do. Well, hold on, Steve said, slapping him on the shoulder. If anything, call me for a beer. Okay, Daniel said, but he knew he wouldn't call. He didn't want to talk about Claire, didn't want to explain that his marriage was falling apart. That evening, Claire returned late, around 10. She entered, saying, Ethan has turned everything upside down again. We'll have to redo it. Daniel was sitting on the couch with a notepad. Dinner is in the refrigerator, he said without looking at her. Thank you, but I'm not hungry, she replied, taking off her shoes. I'll go to bed. Claire, he began, closing the notebook. Can we talk? Seriously. She stopped and looked at him. Dan, I'm tired. Let's do it tomorrow, okay? You always say that, he said, and his voice was firmer than he expected. Every time I try, you brush me off. God, Dan, what do you want? She asked, crossing her arms. I'm working. I'm exhausted. What should I do? Just talk to me, he said. I feel like you're not here. You're somewhere else. She rolled her eyes. Dan, you're exaggerating. Everything is fine. Just give me some space, okay? Okay, he said, feeling something inside him breaking. He watched her go upstairs and wrote in his notebook, She wants space. I don't know what that means. The next day, he left work early, saying he had a meeting. Karen's office was in the city center, in a small building. Karen turned out to be a woman of about 50, with short gray hair and a calm voice. Mr. Harper, good to see you, she said, pointing to the chair. Tell me what brought you here. Daniel sat down, feeling awkward. I'm thinking about divorce. My wife, she said she doesn't love me anymore. I heard it by chance. I see, Karen said, making a note. Have you talked to her about this? No, he answered. I don't know how. She doesn't want to talk. She's always busy, always somewhere else. Okay, Karen said. Let's start with the basics. In Pennsylvania, divorce can be by mutual consent or fault. Judging by what you say, you are not yet ready for an open conversation. This is fine, but you need to prepare. How? Asked Daniel. First, finances, she said. Collect information, bills, mortgage, savings. If it comes to the division of property, this will be important. Secondly, think about what you want. House, assets, custody if there are children. There are no children, Daniel said. Only the house. And, I don't know what I want. I just don't want everything to fall apart. I understand, Karen said. But if she is already emotionally out of the marriage, you need to be prepared. Start small. Open a separate account just to be on the safe side, and keep watching. If you are not ready to talk, gather information. Okay, Daniel said, I can do it. And one more thing, Karen added. Don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. People change, feelings go away. Your job is to protect yourself. Thank you, he said, feeling her words lighten the weight a little. He left the office feeling strange. He didn't tell Claire he was going to see a lawyer, and that felt like a betrayal. But her words, I'm empty, were a real betrayal. He got into the car and wrote on a notepad. I spoke with a lawyer. She's already left. I'm just the last one to know. That evening, Claire returned home around 8. She looked pleased, almost cheerful. Ethan signed the layout, she said, sitting down on the sofa. Finally. Congratulations, Daniel said, but his voice was empty. Thank you, she replied, looking at him. Dan, are you okay? You're kind of tense. Just work, he lied. Lots of things to do. Well, rest, she said and turned on the TV. Daniel looked at her, feeling the distance between them growing. He didn't want to be the one who hides, who is silent. But he didn't know how to start a conversation without ruining everything. He opened his notepad and wrote, "I'm getting ready. I don't know why, but I can't just wait." The next day, he went to the bank during lunch and opened a separate account, as Karen had advised. He transferred some money there, not enough for Claire to notice, but enough to make him feel safer. He didn't tell anyone, not even Mark, although he wrote to him asking him to meet. "Hey Dan, how are you?" was the message. "We haven't hung out for a long time." "It's okay," Daniel replied. "Maybe next week?" "Agreed," Mark wrote. Daniel felt guilty for lying, but couldn't speak. Not now. He returned home and Claire was already there, which was rare. "You're early," he said, entering the kitchen. "Yeah, Ethan let me go early," she replied, preparing the salad. "Want?" "No, thank you," he said. "I'll eat later." "Okay," she said, and her voice was light, as if nothing was happening. Daniel was sitting on the couch with his laptop, checking his email. It was Sunday, around 7 in the evening, and the house was unusually quiet. Claire returned an hour ago from another meeting with Ethan, but she barely spoke, going straight to her office. He had been living in a kind of limbo for the last few weeks, balancing between the hope that everything would get better and the fear that Claire's words overheard at the barbecue would become reality. A meeting with Karen's lawyer gave him a plan, but not peace. He still hadn't told Claire that he knew how she felt, and the silence was becoming more and more pressing. He opened the notebook lying next to him and reread the last entry. "I'm taking steps. I don't know where they will lead, but I can't stand still." He began to write, "She was with Ethan again. She doesn't say what they're talking about, but I see that she's different when she comes back." He stopped when he heard footsteps. Claire walked into the living room holding a mug of tea. Her face was serious, almost tense. "Dan, we need to talk," she said, sitting down in the chair opposite. Daniel closed the laptop and looked at her. His heart began to pound, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "Okay, about what?" "Give it a like if you want to know what Claire is really going to talk about. And subscribe to the channel. Daniel is ready to shock her with the fact that he already knows the truth." Claire put her mug down and clasped her hands. I don't know how to say this, but I can't do it anymore. I'm done. I can't go on like this." Daniel felt the words hit him, even though he had been waiting for them. He looked at her, trying to find any hint of regret, but her eyes were hard. "What do you mean, finished?" he asked, although he knew the answer. "It's not working, Dan," she said, looking away. "We are not happy. I'm not happy. I tried, I really do, but I can't pretend." "You tried," he repeated, his voice quieter than he intended. When? When did you try, Claire? You've barely spoken to me for months." She frowned, her cheeks slightly red. "This is unfair. Do you think it's easy for me? I work, I try to keep everything under control, but I don't feel anything. I look at us and I feel empty." Daniel clenched his jaw. Her words echoed what he had heard at the barbecue. "Empty," he said. "You told Leela this. I heard." Claire froze, her eyes widening. "You? What? Did you eavesdrop?" "I didn't eavesdrop," he said, trying not to lose his temper. "I was in the garage. You said you don't love me, that you are everything, and I was waiting for you to say it to my face. But you were silent." "God, Dan," she said, running her hand through her hair. "Why didn't you tell me? Why were you just silent?" "What should I have done?" he asked, his voice getting louder. "Make a scene? To ask why you laugh with Ethan but barely talk to me? I tried to talk, Claire. You waved it off. Every time." She opened her mouth, but didn't say anything. Then she shook her head. "This is not about Ethan. This is about us. I don't know when this happened, but I can't take it anymore. I want to be honest." "Honest," Daniel said, and the words sounded bitter. He stood up, went to the bag lying by the door, and took out a folder. He prepared it after his meeting with Karen. Divorce papers, not yet signed, but ready. He placed the folder on the table in front of Claire. "Here, If you're done, let's do it right. Claire stared at the folder, her face pale. What? What is this? Documents, he said. For a divorce, I spoke to a lawyer. Do you want to be honest? Me too. She opened the folder, her hands shaking slightly. Have you? Have you already decided everything? Without me? You're kidding me, you decided it, Claire, he said, sitting back down. You said you were finished. I'm just following you. Oh my God, Dan, she said, closing the folder. I didn't expect. I thought you would argue, ask to stay. And you just give up? I'm not giving up, he said, and his voice was firm. I respect your choice. You don't want to be with me. Fine. I won't go on my knees and beg. Claire looked at him, and resentment flashed in her eyes. You're not even trying, she said. 12 years, Dan, and you just take and hand me the papers? What do you want? He asked, feeling tiredness creeping in. So that I beg. I can't make you love me, Claire. She was silent, looking away. Then she got up, took the mug, and went into the kitchen. I need to think, she said without turning around. Okay, Daniel said. I'll be upstairs. He went up to the bedroom, feeling his legs getting heavy. He didn't want to quarrel, but her reaction shock, offense surprised him. He thought she would be glad he didn't argue. He took out a notepad and wrote, She said she was finished. I gave her the papers. She's angry, but I don't know why. Claire did not return to the living room. He heard her walking around the kitchen, then turned on the TV. He went to bed, but could not sleep. He recalled their life, how they bought this house, how they argued about what furniture to get, how they laughed at stupid films. Where did it all go? He thought about her words, I thought you would argue. Did she want him to fight? Or was it just a habit to expect him to cling? This morning Claire was in the kitchen when he came down. She was drinking coffee. The folder lay on the table, untouched. Are you serious? She asked without looking at him. Yes, he said, pouring himself some coffee. You said you couldn't. I don't want to pretend that everything is fine. I didn't think you were so fast. She began, but fell silent. Dan, that's 12 years. Don't you want to at least try, maybe therapy or something? Do you want therapy? He asked, sitting down opposite. You said you were empty. What will therapy change? She pursed her lips, her fingers tapping the mug. I don't know. But I didn't expect you to just hand in the papers, and that's it. Claire, he said, trying to speak calmly, you decided. I heard you at the barbecue. You don't love me. I won't force you to stay. You talk about this all the time, she said, her voice becoming harsher. You heard one phrase and decided that was all. I tried, Dan. I didn't mean to hurt you. Then why didn't you tell me? He asked. Why did I have to find out from Leela? You've been pushing me away for months. I tried to talk, but you didn't want to. She was silent, looking into her mug. Then she stood up. I need to go to work, she said. I'll think about the papers. Okay, he said, feeling something settling inside. He watched her leave and wrote on a notepad. She wants me to fight, but I don't know why. That afternoon, he called Karen to tell her what had happened. You did the right thing, she said. You have shown that you are ready to move on. Her reaction is normal. People often get angry when they don't get what they expect. She thinks I'm giving up, Daniel said, but I don't want to beg. And they shouldn't, said Karen. If she wants to speak, let her speak clearly. In the meantime, start packing your things. If you decide to leave, it's best to be prepared. I'm already thinking about it, he said. Thank you. Call me if anything changes, Karen said and hung up. Daniel returned home and began packing his things. He didn't want to leave right now, but Karen was right, he had to be ready. He packed some clothes, some books, and a laptop. He did not take anything in common, no photographs, no gifts. It didn't seem right. Claire returned in the evening, around 9. She stopped in the bedroom doorway when she saw the boxes. Are you getting ready already? She asked, her voice trembling. Yes, he said, folding his shirts. You said you were finished. I don't want to delay. Oh my God, Dan, she said, sitting down on the bed. You don't even give me a chance. You're just running away." "I'm not running away," he said, turning to her. "You want freedom. I'm giving it to you." "This is not freedom," she said, and her eyes sparkled. I don't know. I didn't think you'd let go so easily." "Easily?" he asked, his voice getting louder. "Do you think it's easy for me? 12 years old, Claire. I loved you." "I'm still—" He stopped, clenching his fists. "But you don't love me. I won't force you." She was silent, looking at the boxes. Then she stood up. "Do what you want," she said, and went into the bathroom. Daniel watched her go, feeling how everything was falling apart. He wrote in his notebook, "She's mad that I don't fight, but I can't. This is the end." The next day, he found an apartment in downtown Philadelphia, small but affordable. He signed the lease without telling Claire. He didn't want arguments, didn't want her to be offended. He just wanted to move on. Claire didn't talk about papers. She acted as if nothing had happened, but her silence was louder than words. Daniel packed his things, feeling like the house they had built together was becoming alien. He wrote in a notepad, "I'm leaving, not because I want to, because she has already left." Daniel moved into an apartment in downtown Philadelphia on Friday morning. The car was loaded with boxes, clothes, books, a laptop, some dishes. He didn't take anything from the house that would remind him of Claire. No photos of them together, no souvenirs from their trips. It was his decision to start from scratch. The apartment was small, one bedroom, a kitchen combined with a living room and a bathroom. He signed the lease the day before the move, after talking to Claire when she announced their marriage was over. Her words, "I'm done," still echoed in his head, but he didn't let them take over. He handed her the divorce papers, and her shock and hurt only strengthened his resolve. Now, standing in an empty apartment, he felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't bound by her expectations. "Well, here you are at home," he said to himself, putting the box on the floor. The voice sounded muffled in the empty room. He walked around the apartment, checking sockets and taps. Everything worked. He sat down on the only chair he had brought and took out a notepad. The last entry read, "I'm leaving, not because I want to, because she has already left." He wrote, "New apartment, empty, but it's mine." That same day, he went to the nearest supermarket, bought food, coffee, and a couple of towels. On the way back, I noticed a pawn shop sign. There was a used acoustic guitar in the window. He paused, remembering college when he played in an amateur band. It was so long ago that it seemed like someone else's life. He went inside. "How much for the guitar?" he asked the salesman, an elderly man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose. 150, he answered. "A good instrument, almost new." "Can I try?" asked Daniel. "Of course," said the seller, taking the guitar off the hook. Daniel sat down on a chair in the corner of the store and ran his fingers along the strings. The sound was clear, although the guitar needed tuning. He played a few chords, a simple melody he remembered from his youth. The fingers moved awkwardly, but the feeling was familiar, like meeting an old friend. "I'll take it," he said, taking out his wallet. "Excellent choice," said the seller, punching the check. "Are you playing?" "I used to play," Daniel answered. "I haven't picked it up for a long time." "Well, it's never too late to come back," the seller said, handing him a guitar in a case. "Good luck." Daniel returned to the apartment, set the guitar by the sofa, and unpacked the boxes. By evening, he finished, although there were few things. He made coffee, sat down on the sofa, and picked up the guitar again. Played the same chords, then tried a different melody. His fingers hurt, but he continued until he felt a slight smile on his face. For the first time in months, he did something just for himself. "Not bad," he said out loud, although the sound was far from ideal. He wrote in a notepad, "I bought a guitar. Played. It's bad, but I don't care." The next day he went to work, feeling a little lighter. Colleagues noticed the change. "Dan, you look, I don't know, more alive today," Steve said, entering his cabin. "Yeah, I got some sleep," Daniel lied, opening the table. "Well, keep it up," Steve said, slapping him on the shoulder. and Richard was already grumbling that you were falling behind. I know, I'll fix it, Daniel answered. He was determined not to let personal problems ruin his work. In the evening, he returned to the apartment and picked up the guitar again. Played a few more tunes, trying to remember the old songs. He was in no hurry, did not set goals. It was just fun, no pressure. He wrote in his notebook. Played again. My fingers hurt, but that's good. Claire called the next day while he was drinking coffee at breakfast. Dan, hi, she said, her voice cautious. Are you? How are you? Okay, he replied, putting down the mug. Settled down in the apartment. Already? She asked, and offense flashed in her voice. You're fast. You said you were finished, he said, trying to speak evenly. I don't want to delay. She was silent for a second. I didn't think you'd leave so quickly. We could talk. We talked, Claire, he said. You said you were empty. What more can I say? God, Dan, she said, her voice becoming harsher. You talk about this all the time. I didn't want it to end like this. Then how? He asked. Did you want me to beg? I won't. That's not what I meant, she said. I don't know. I need time. Okay, he said. You have time, but I won't wait. She sighed. Okay, I'll call you later. Okay, he said and hung up. He wrote in his notebook. Claire called. She wants to talk, but I don't want to listen. At work, he focused on reports, catching up on lost time. Richard noticed an improvement. Dan, this sounds more like you, he said during the meeting. Keep it up. Thank you, Daniel replied, feeling a little proud. He didn't want Claire or divorce to define his life. In the evening, he played the guitar again, trying out difficult chords. He was wrong, laughed at himself, and continued. It was liberating to do something without expectations. He wrote in his notebook, played worse than in college, but I like it. The next day, he received a text from Mark, an old friend from college. Hey, Dan, you're missing, Mark wrote. Let's have a beer. On Friday? Okay, Daniel replied. Name the place. Rusty Nail, 7 in the evening, Mark wrote. Don't be late. Daniel smiled. He hadn't seen Mark for months, but the thought of seeing him was nice. He wrote in his notebook, Mark is calling. Maybe this is what I need. On Friday, he came to the bar a little earlier. Mark was already there, sitting at the beer counter. Dan, dude, Mark said, standing up. You look like someone who ran away from the office. Yes, sort of, Daniel said, sitting down. How are you? I'm alive, Mark said, grinning. And you? You've been quiet lately. Yeah, that's it, Daniel said, ordering a beer. Work, you know. Don't pour it, Mark said, looking at him. You're not just busy. What happened? Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to spill everything, but Mark wasn't the type to pry into his soul. Claire and I. We're going our separate ways, he said, looking into his glass. Damn, Mark said, shaking his head. Seriously, you were? Well, like a rock. Apparently not, Daniel said. She said she doesn't love me. I left. Damn, Dan, Mark said. This sucks. Are you okay? I'm trying, Daniel replied. Move to an apartment. I bought a guitar and play little by little. Guitar, Mark said, smiling. Like in the old days. Are you a rock star again? Huh, I don't think so, Daniel said, laughing. Fingers are like wood, but it helps. Cool, Mark said, raising his glass. Here's to new beginnings, brother. To them, said Daniel, clinking his glass. He felt a warmth that had not been there for a long time. They talked for another hour about work, about old friends, about life. Mark didn't press, didn't ask unnecessary questions, and Daniel was grateful. When they said goodbye, Mark said, Dan, if anything happens, call me. Don't get lost. I won't, Daniel replied. Thank you. Daniel woke up at 6 in the morning before the alarm clock had time to ring. The apartment was quiet, only the faint noise of cars coming from the street. He lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, and felt like he didn't want to get lost in thoughts of Claire again. It had been a week since he'd moved in, and although her call and Mark's words at the bar had given him a boost, he still felt empty. He stood up and put on an old sports t-shirt and shorts that he hadn't worn in years. Today, he decided to start running not for health reasons, but to clear his head. He went outside, the cool Philadelphia air invigorating. He ran slowly along the sidewalk, past closed cafes and sleeping offices. His breathing was labored, his legs felt heavy, but he continued. 20 minutes later, he stopped, hands on his knees, and realized that for the first time in a long time he was not thinking about Claire, but about how to breathe. He returned to the apartment, feeling slightly tired and strangely satisfied. He took out a notepad and wrote, "Running. I could barely breathe, but my head was clearer." Not a bad start, he said to himself, pouring coffee. He opened his laptop and started looking for something to occupy his time. He came across an advertisement for a carpentry course at a local adult center. It was nearby, classes were in the evenings, and the price was reasonable. He remembered helping his father build shelves in the garage as a child. Then it seemed like an adventure. He signed up without hesitation. Maybe at least something will work out, he muttered, closing the laptop. Claire texted him during the day while he was at work. The message was short. "Dan, can we meet? We need to discuss the papers." He looked at the screen, feeling his heart clench. He didn't want to see her, but he knew it was inevitable. "Okay," he replied. "When?" "Tomorrow, at the cafe on the corner? At 6, she wrote. "Okay," he wrote and put the phone away. He didn't want to think about it now. He wrote in his notebook, "Claire wants to talk. I don't want to, but I have to." He was more focused at work than before. Steve noticed this when he entered his cabin. "Dan, you're a beast," he said, looking at the screen with ready-made reports. "What, do you want a bonus?" "Yeah, I'm dreaming," Daniel answered, smiling. "I just got involved." "Well, keep it up," Steve said as he left. "Richard is pleased, by the way." "Okay," Daniel said. He felt that work was something he could control, unlike anything else. In the evening, he went to his first carpentry class. The center was in an old building. It smelled of wood and varnish. The instructor, a man in his 60s named Roy, met a group of about 10 people, ranging from young guys to older women. "Welcome," Roy said, standing at the workbench. "Today we'll start with the basics. I want everyone to do something simple by the end of the course. Shelf, drawer, whatever. The main thing is to do it yourself. What if your hands are crooked?" asked the guy in the baseball cap, causing laughter. "Then we'll straighten it out," Roy answered, grinning. "Everything comes with practice." Daniel listened, feeling like a newbie, but not shy. Roy showed how to work with a saw and plane and explained how to choose wood. Daniel decided to make a bookcase that was simple but functional. He wanted something in his apartment that he made himself. "Good choice," Roy said, looking at his sketch. "Start with the boards, measure accurately. If you make a mistake, you have to redo it." "Got it," Daniel replied, taking the ruler. He worked intently, measuring and sawing. By the end of the lesson, he had one shelf ready, not perfect, but strong. "Not bad for a newbie," Roy said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Continue." Daniel returned home, feeling tired in his arms and a little proud. He wrote in a notebook, "I made a shelf. Not a masterpiece, but mine." In the morning he ran again, this time a little longer. Breathing was easier, thoughts were clearer. He thought about work, about the closet, about the guitar that he played every evening. Claire was still in his head, but she no longer took up all the space. He wrote in his notebook, "Running. I think about myself, not about her." In the evening, he met Claire in a cafe. She was already there, sitting by the window with coffee. Her face was tense, but she smiled as he approached. "Hey, Dan," she said, pushing back her chair. "Thank you for coming." "Hi," he replied, sitting down. "What did you want to discuss?" "A folder," she said, looking at the table. I read it. Do you really want this?" "You said you were finished," he said, trying to speak evenly. "I'm just following your words." "God, Dan," she said, shaking her head. "I didn't think you were so fast. I thought we could try something." Therapy, maybe. Do you want therapy? He asked, looking into her eyes. Or do you just don't want to feel guilty? She fell silent, her fingers tightening around the mug. It's not fair, she said. I didn't want to hurt you. I don't know what I feel. You told Leela that you were empty, he said. I heard. You don't love me. What is there to discuss? I didn't want you to hear that, she said, her voice shaking. I was upset, so I talked to my friend. This doesn't mean that I have decided everything. But you decided, he said. You said you were finished. I won't beg, Claire. I don't want to be the one who clings. She looked at him, her eyes sparkling. You have changed, she said. You've never been so cold. I'm not cold, he said. I'm just trying to move on with my life. Okay, she said, looking away. I'll think about the papers. But I need time. You have time, he said, standing up. Call me when you decide. He left the cafe, feeling the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He didn't want to be tough, but he couldn't let her pull him back. He wrote in his notebook, spoke to Claire. She wants time. I don't want to wait. The next week, he ran every morning, increasing the distance. He felt his body getting used to it, his thoughts becoming clearer. While taking carpentry classes, he continued to work on the cabinet. By the end of the second session, he had all the shelves and side panels completed. You're a quick learner, Roy said, inspecting his work. A couple more classes and it'll be ready. Thank you, Daniel replied. I want it to work. It will work, said Roy. The main thing is not to rush. Daniel brought the pieces home and began assembling the cabinet in the living room. He worked until midnight, tightening screws and checking with levels. When he finished, the cabinet stood straight, strong, his. He placed several books on the shelves and stood back, looking at the results. It was a small victory, but it meant more than he expected. He wrote in a notepad, I made a closet. This is mine. I can create something. Mark called on Friday, asking to meet again. Dan, are you alive? He asked, laughing. Let's go to the bar. We need to shake ourselves up. Okay, Daniel replied. The same one? Yeah, 7 in the evening, Mark said. Don't be late. At the bar, Mark was in a good mood, talking about his work and the new construction project. How are you, rock star? He asked with a wink. Is the guitar still alive? She's alive, Daniel said, smiling. I play every day. It's bad, but I try. That's the main thing, Mark said, raising his glass. What about Claire? Eat news? We met, said Daniel. She wants to talk, but I don't know what. She doesn't know what she wants. It happens, Mark said, shaking his head. My ex did that too. She wanted me to run after her. Don't be fooled, Dan. Live for yourself. I'm trying, Daniel said. I run in the morning, I make a closet. It sounds stupid, but it helps. It's not stupid, Mark said. You do your own thing. This is great. Daniel returned home from work, leaving his bag at the door. The apartment no longer seemed so empty. The bookcase he had made during his carpentry course stood against the wall, and his guitar lay on the sofa. He felt better than a month ago when he moved. Morning runs, carpentry classes, and meetings with Mark made him feel like he was taking back control. But Claire was still a shadow in his thoughts, although he tried not to think about her. He turned on the coffee maker and checked his phone. There was a message from Claire sent an hour ago. Dan, can we talk? This is important. He looked at the screen, feeling something tighten inside him. They met in a cafe a week ago, and then she talked about time, about therapy, but nothing concrete. He did not answer immediately, deciding that he would think about it later. He wrote in his notebook, Claire is writing again. I don't know what she wants. He made coffee and sat on the couch, opening his laptop to check his email. Among the spam and work emails was one from Claire sent last night. Subject, please read. He hesitated, but opened it. The letter was long, not like her usual short messages. Dan, it began, I know you don't want to talk, and I don't blame you. But I need you to understand. I didn't cheat on you. Ethan is just a client, sometimes a friend, but nothing more. I know you saw us in the cafe, and I know what it looked like. But it's not what you think. I wasn't looking for someone else. I'm just lost. I don't know when it started, but I felt like I was drowning in our life. Work, home, routine, I stopped feeling alive. I didn't want to hurt you, but I didn't know how to tell you. I told Leela because I couldn't keep it to myself. I was wrong that I didn't tell you. I don't want you to think that I'm bad. I'm just a person who is confused. If you want to talk, I'm ready. Claire. Daniel read the letter twice. Every word felt like a blow, but not because of Ethan. He didn't think she was cheating, that was never the point. The main thing was in her words at the barbecue. I'm empty. She didn't deny them in the letter, didn't say she loved him. She explained, but did not change the essence. He closed his laptop and picked up a notepad. Wrote, I read the letter. She says she didn't cheat, but she doesn't say she wants to be with me. He stood up and walked around the room, trying to understand what he was feeling. Anger? Sadness? No, more like fatigue. He didn't want to parse her words and look for hope in them. He remembered their meeting in the cafe, her indecision, her resentment when he did not beg. This letter was the same. She wanted him to understand her, but did not offer anything in return. His phone vibrated. Another message from Claire. Dan, did you receive my letter? Please answer. He looked at the screen but did not write. Instead, he picked up his guitar and started playing. The melody was simple, one of the ones he had learned in college. His fingers moved better than before, and the music drowned out thoughts of Claire. He played until he felt he could breathe more freely. He wrote in his notebook, didn't answer, don't want. The next day he went to work, trying to concentrate. Steve entered his cabin with another joke. Dan, you're like a robot again, he said, sitting down on the edge of the table. What, did the guitar hit you? Yeah, I'm rehearsing for the tour, Daniel answered, smiling. I'll be selling tickets soon. Ha, I'm first in line, Steve said, laughing. Seriously, are you okay? You look better, but still thoughtful. It's okay, Daniel said. Just life, you know. Well, if anything happens, call me, Steve said, leaving. Daniel nodded, but knew he wouldn't tell. He didn't want to talk about Claire, about her letter. He wanted to move on. At lunchtime, he went for a run, despite the cold wind. He ran faster than usual, feeling his lungs burn. It was painful, but cleansing. He wrote in his notebook, running. I thought about the letter, but not about her. In the evening, he took a carpentry course. Roy, the instructor, was checking his closet, which was almost ready. Good job, Dan, Roy said, running his hand along the shelf. A little more sanding, and it will look like it came from a store. Thank you, Daniel replied. I want to finish next week. You'll make it, Roy said. The main thing is not to rush. Quality is more important. Daniel nodded and began sanding the board. Working with my hands was as calming as running or playing the guitar. He focused on the movement, the sound of the sandpaper. Claire and her letter faded into the background. He wrote in his notebook, sanding the cabinet. It's better than thinking about her. Claire wrote again 2 days later, in the evening, when he returned from his run. Dan, I know you're angry, but please answer. I don't want it to end like this. He read the message, feeling irritated. She didn't want him to be angry, but she didn't offer anything new. He didn't answer, but instead picked up his guitar and played a tune he'd begun to compose himself. It was uneven, but his. He wrote in his notepad, another message. Didn't answer. I'm not angry. I just don't want to go back. At work, he received praise from Richard for his reports. Dan, you're back in shape, Richard said, clapping him on the shoulder. Keep it up. Thank you, Daniel replied. He felt that work was his support, like running and carpentry. He didn't want Claire to take everything from him. Mark called on Friday as usual. Dan, bar, tomorrow, 7, he said without greeting. No excuses. Okay, Daniel replied, laughing. Will. Cool, Mark said. And grab a guitar, maybe you'll play. Ha, not in this life, Daniel said. But I will come. Agreed, Mark said and hung up. Daniel sat in Karen Wilson's office, looking at the stack of documents on the table. It was Thursday morning, and he was taking the day off to finish what he had started months ago. The divorce papers he had given Claire lay in front of him, now bearing her signature. Karen, the lawyer, sat across from him, flipping through the pages to make sure everything was in order. Daniel felt tired, not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that comes when a long journey comes to an end. Everything looks right, Karen said, looking up. Have you and Claire agreed on the division of assets? Yes, Daniel replied, leaning back in his chair. Equally. Savings, car, everything in half. I leave the house to her. Karen raised her eyebrows. The house is the largest part of the property. Are you sure? I'm sure, he said. He is hers. I don't want to live there. Okay, Karen said, making a note. This will simplify the process. You both signed the agreement, so the trial shouldn't drag on. If there are no questions, I will send the documents today. Send it, Daniel said, feeling something settle inside. I want to finish. Got it, Karen said, looking at him with a slight smile. You hold on, Daniel. Not everyone goes through it so calmly. I don't know if it's calm, he said, shrugging his shoulders, but I do what I can. That's already a lot, she replied, closing the folder. If anything changes, call, or if Claire wants to renegotiate the terms. I don't think she'll want to, Daniel said. She signed. Karen nodded. Then that's it. I'll let you know when the court approves. Thank you, Daniel said, standing up. He shook her hand and left the office, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. He took a notepad out of his pocket and wrote, The documents are ready. Her house. This is the end. He got into the car, but did not immediately start the engine. He thought about Claire, about her letters, about her attempts to talk. In recent weeks, she wrote less often, but each message was like an echo of their conversation in the cafe she wanted him to understand, but did not offer anything new. He didn't answer, not because he was angry, but because he didn't see the point. She was out of his life long before she said, I'm done. Claire called while he was driving home. He looked at the screen but didn't pick up the phone. A minute later, a message came. Dan, I know you are with a lawyer. Can we meet? We need to talk. He sighed, feeling irritated. She always wanted to talk when he was ready to move on. He wrote in his notebook, Claire is calling. I don't want to talk. But he knew that he couldn't avoid her forever. He replied, Okay, cafe on the corner, 6 o'clock in the evening. She wrote, Thank you, I'll be there. In the evening, he came to the cafe a little earlier. Claire was already sitting by the window with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked tired, but her eyes were alert, as if she was preparing for a fight. Hi, Dan, she said as he sat down. Thank you for coming. Hi, he replied, ordering coffee from the waiter. What did you want to discuss? Papers, she said, looking at the table. I signed it. But I'm not sure what we're doing is right. Daniel looked at her, feeling tiredness welling up inside him. You said you were done, Claire. I gave you the papers. You signed. What's wrong? I didn't think it would all be so fast, she said, squeezing her hands. I thought we could. I don't know, try again. Talk. Maybe therapy. You already said that, he said, trying to keep his voice even. In a cafe in letters. But you don't say what you want. You don't say you love me. You just don't want to feel guilty. It's not fair, Dan, she said, her voice shaking. I'm trying to be honest. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't cheat. I didn't. It's not a matter of treason, he interrupted. The point is that you left. You told Leela that you were empty. You didn't talk to me. You didn't try. You're gone, Claire. I'm just making it official. She was silent, looking into her cup. Then she looked up. Do you really want this? Divorce? At home? Do you just give everything? The house is yours, he said. I don't want to live there. I don't want to live in the past. We share everything equally except the house. That's fair. Fair enough, she repeated, and her voice was bitter. You give up everything so easily. 12 years, Dan. Easily? He asked, his voice getting louder. Do you think it's easy for me? I loved you, Claire. I wanted us to be together. But you decided for both of us. I won't beg. She looked at him, her eyes sparkling. I didn't want you to beg, she said. I wanted you to. I don't know. Show that you care. I care, he said, feeling his throat tighten. But I can't make you love me. I don't want to be the one who clings to emptiness. Claire was silent, her fingers fiddling with the edge of the napkin. I don't know what to say, she finally said. I don't want you to hate me. I don't hate you, he said, and it was true. I just want to move on with my life. She nodded but didn't answer. The waiter brought the coffee and Daniel took a sip to fill the silence. Claire spoke again, her voice quieter. I thought we could remain friends, she said. Not now, but someday. Maybe, he said, but he didn't believe it. But not now. Okay, she said, looking away. I'll think about what to do with the house. If you change your mind. I won't change my mind, he said, putting down the cup. The house is yours. Everything is decided. She nodded, but her face was tense. Thank you for coming, she said. I'll call if you need anything. Okay, he said, standing up. Good luck, Claire. He left the cafe without looking back. It was cold outside, but he felt warm inside not from anger, but from clarity. He made a choice, and it was his choice. He wrote in his notebook, Met Claire, her house, I'm free. The next day he went for a run as usual. He ran longer than before, feeling his body become stronger. He was focused on his work and finished the report ahead of schedule. Steve noticed this. Dan, you're just a machine, he said, entering the cabin. What, does the guitar inspire you? Yeah, Daniel replied, smiling. And run. Running, Steve said, raising his eyebrows. Are you an athlete now? I'm trying, Daniel said. Better than sitting and thinking. Huh, that's right, Steve said as he walked away. Keep it up. In the evening, Daniel took a carpentry course. He started a new project, a small table for his apartment. Roy, the instructor, approved of his sketch. Good idea, Roy said. Simple, but strong. Start with the legs, they are the most difficult. Got it, Daniel replied, taking the board. He worked, feeling his hands find a rhythm. Carpentry, running, guitar, all this was his, not connected with Claire. He wrote in his notebook, started the table, my life. Mark called on Saturday offering to meet. Dan, bar, today, 7, he said. No excuses. I will, Daniel replied, laughing. I don't take a guitar. It's a pity, said Mark. Okay, see you later. In the bar, Mark was in his own style. He joked and talked about work. Daniel told him about his meeting with Claire. You're great, Mark said, raising his glass. I gave away the house, closed the topic. Now live for yourself. I'm trying, Daniel said. I'm running, making a table. It sounds small, but it helps. Nothing is small, said Mark. You are building your life. This is the main thing. Daniel nodded, feeling Mark's words sink in. Daniel was sitting at his desk when Richard, his boss, walked into the cubicle with an unexpected proposal. It was Monday morning and Daniel had just finished checking the report. He had felt more confident in recent weeks. His divorce from Claire was almost finalized. Jogging and carpentry gave him a sense of control, and meetings with Mark reminded him that he was not alone. But Philadelphia still seemed small, full of memories of the past. Dan, we have a conversation, Richard said, sitting down on the edge of the table. We have an opening in a branch in Maine. Elsewood, small town. They are looking for an analyst. The work is simpler than here, but stable. I thought about you. Daniel looked at him, surprised. Maine, it's far away. Yeah, Richard said, nodding. But you're coping, and I know you're going through personal changes. Maybe a change of scenery will help. Think about it. We need an answer by the end of the week. Okay, Daniel said. Thanks for the offer. Richard left, and Daniel opened his browser and typed in Elsewood, Maine. The pictures showed a small town by the sea, wooden houses, a pier, foggy mornings. It wasn't like Philadelphia, noisy, bustling. He felt a pang of curiosity. He took out a notepad and wrote, "Richard offered a job in Maine. Elsewood, maybe this is a chance." That evening, he called Mark to discuss. "Maine," Mark said, laughing. "Are you going to be a fisherman now?" "Ha, hardly," Daniel replied, smiling. "Just work. Less stress, different city. I think it's worth a try." "Listen, Dan," Mark said, and his voice became more serious. "If it feels right to you, go for it. You've already been through hell with Claire. Start again. Maine sounds like a place to breathe." "Yeah," Daniel said. "I thought so too." "Then do it," Mark said. "And invite me to visit you. I'll try your fish." "Agreed," Daniel said, laughing. He hung up and wrote on his notepad, spoke to Mark. "I'm going to Elsewood." The next day, he told Richard that he agreed. By the end of the week, everything was decided. The transfer would be in a month, time to get ready and move. Daniel found a cottage in Elsewood through a rental website, small, one bedroom, right on the water. The price was lower than his apartment in Philadelphia. He signed the agreement without hesitation. He wrote in his notebook, "Elsewood Cottage, my new home." Claire texted him that evening. "Dan, court papers. Everything is going well. Can we meet?" He looked at the message, feeling the old tension return. He didn't want to see her and didn't want to understand her words again. He replied, "I'm going to Maine for work. If you need anything, write." She didn't answer, and he was glad for that. He wrote in his notebook, "Claire is writing. I don't want to talk. I'm moving on." The move was simple. He packed boxes, clothes, books, a guitar, carpentry tools, and dismantled his bookcase and put it in the car. The apartment in Philadelphia was empty within a day. He said goodbye to Steve and his colleagues, promising to keep in touch. "Man, are you serious?" Steve said, shaking his head. "Are you a hermit now?" "Not really," Daniel replied, smiling. "We just need a new start." "Well, good luck," Steve said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Don't forget us." "I won't forget," Daniel said. He left early in the morning, loading the car. The journey took almost 7 hours. When he drove into Elsewood, the sun was setting, and the town looked exactly like the photographs. Quiet, with wooden houses and the smell of the sea. He found a cottage by the water, parked, and entered. The inside smelled of wood. The furniture was old but strong. He opened the window, and the sound of the waves filled the room. He stood listening, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe freely. He wrote in his notebook, "I have arrived. The sound of the waves. This is my place." The next day, he began to settle in. I sorted out the boxes, assembled the closet, and placed the guitar by the sofa. He went to a local store and bought food and coffee. The saleswoman, a woman in her 40s, smiled at him. "New guy?" she asked, punching the food. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "I just arrived." "Welcome to Elsewood," she said. "It's quiet here, but the people are good. Call me if anything happens. I'm Marge." "Thank you, Marge," Daniel said. "I'm Daniel." He returned to the cottage, feeling lighter from this simple conversation. In the evening, he sat on the porch, listening to the waves. This became his ritual. Every evening he would go out, drink coffee, and look at the water. He wrote in his notebook, "Conversation with Marge. Waves. I'm home." Work began a week later. The firm was small, just 10 people, in contrast to the bustling office in Philadelphia. His new boss, Linda, was straightforward but kind. "Daniel, welcome," she said, showing him the table. "The work is not difficult, but important. Can you handle it?" "I can handle it," he answered, sitting down at the computer. "Okay," Linda said. "If anything, ask. We're like family here." Daniel nodded, feeling that this place was different, calm, without fuss. He wrote in his notebook, "First day at work. Linda is normal. It's easier than Philadelphia." In the evening, he went for a run along the shore. The road was rough, but the view of the sea was inspiring. He ran, listening to the waves, and thought about how far he had come from the past. Claire hadn't written since he said he was leaving, and he was glad of that. He wrote in his notebook, "Running by the sea. Claire is silent. This is for the best. Mark called on Saturday, unannounced as always. Dan, are you already fishing? He asked, laughing. Ha, not yet, Daniel answered, sitting on the porch. But the sea is nearby. Come and see. Seriously? Said Mark. Maybe I'll come. How are you doing there? Okay, Daniel said, and it was true. The work is simple, the town is quiet. It's easier to breathe. Cool, Mark said. And Claire? What's wrong with her? We signed the papers, Daniel said. She wanted to talk, but I left. I don't want to go back. Well done, said Mark. Live your life, brother. Call me if anything happens. Call me too, Daniel answered, smiling. He hung up and wrote on his notepad, spoke to Mark. My life, I'm here. He started playing the guitar more often while sitting on the porch. The melodies were simple, but his. He didn't strive for perfection, he just enjoyed it. He wrote in his notebook, Played by the sea, this is for me. Elswood was small, but alive. People said hello on the street, didn't intrude, but were open. Daniel went to a local cafe where the barista, Sarah, remembered his order. Latte without sugar, right? She asked, smiling, on the third day. Exactly, Daniel replied. Good memory. Habit, she said. You're new, right? Where? Philadelphia, he said. New job, new start. Cool, Sarah said. Elswood is quiet, but it has its own charm. If anything, ask. Thank you, Daniel said, taking the coffee. Daniel woke up to the sound of waves coming through the open window. It was Saturday morning, and Elswood, as always, greeted it with silence. It had been a month since he moved into the cottage by the water, and he was starting to find a rhythm in this new life. Jogging along the shore, working in a small company, evenings with a guitar, all this became his support. Claire didn't write anymore, and her silence, although it left a slight emptiness, was a relief. He felt that he was beginning to belong to himself. He made coffee and sat on the porch, holding a notepad. The last entry read, Sarah in the cafe. The people here are simple. This is good. He wrote, Today I am looking for a carpentry group. I want to make a table. The idea was born last week when he realized his cottage was missing something handmade. The bookcase he brought from Philadelphia was a start, but he wanted more. Daniel opened his laptop and found an advertisement for a carpentry group in Elswood. Classes took place at a local center twice a week. He signed up without hesitation and called the organizer, a man named Paul. Hello, this is Daniel Harper, he said. I'm talking about the carpentry group. Can I join? Of course, Paul replied, his voice warm. Come on Tuesday, 6 in the evening. There are tools, but if you have your own, take them. Great, Daniel said. I'm a beginner, but I have a little experience. Nothing will teach you, Paul said, laughing. The main thing is desire. See you. Thank you, Daniel said and hung up. He wrote in his notebook, I signed up for a carpentry group. Paul sounds normal. In the evening, he went to a cafe where Sarah, the barista, already knew his order. She placed the latte on the counter and smiled. No sugar again? She asked. Yeah, Daniel replied, taking the cup. I don't like sweets. Serious guy, she said with a wink. What's new? Feeling comfortable in Elswood. I'm trying, he said. Signed up for a carpentry group. I want to make a table. Cool, Sarah said. My brother also makes crafts. If anything, ask Paul, he's a master. And come to the open mic on Friday. You play the guitar, right? How do you know? Daniel asked, surprised. Rumors, she said, laughing. Small town. Someone saw you playing on the porch. Ha, there are spies everywhere, Daniel said, smiling. Maybe I'll come, but I'm not for the public. Nobody forces you, said Sarah. Just play for yourself. It's fun. I'll think about it, he said. Thank you. He returned home and wrote in his notebook, Sarah about the microphone. Maybe I'll try. He picked up his guitar and played a tune he had been composing over the past weeks. She was simple, but his. He wasn't thinking about performing, but the idea of playing for himself in a cafe didn't seem so scary. On Tuesday, he came to the carpentry center. Paul, a strong man of about 50, met him at the entrance. "Daniel?" he asked, holding out his hand. "Glad to see you. What do you want to do?" "The table," Daniel said, "for the cottage. Simple but strong." "Good choice," Paul said. "Let's go, I'll show you the workshop." There were 8 people in the group, men and women of different ages. Paul introduced Daniel and everyone nodded, no questions asked. Daniel selected the boards, showed the sketch, and Paul approved. "Start with the legs," Paul said. "They set the foundation. If it's crooked, everything will fall apart." "Got it," Daniel replied, picking up the plane. He worked intently, feeling the wood give in. It was similar to his studies in Philadelphia, but here, among new people, he felt freer. One of the participants, a guy named Ted, came closer. "New, huh?" he asked, polishing his board. "Where?" "Philadelphia," Daniel answered. "I moved recently." "Cool," Ted said. "Elsewood is a different matter. Quiet, but personal." "Yeah," Daniel said. "I already like it." They talked about carpentry, about local bars, about the weather. The conversation was easy, without pressure, and Daniel felt like he was joining in. By the end of the lesson, he had 2 legs ready for the table. Paul looked them over. "Not bad," he said. "Exactly. Continue." "Thank you," Daniel replied, feeling a little proud. He wrote in his notebook, "I made legs for the table. Paul praises. This is mine." On Friday, he decided to go to an open microphone in a cafe. Sarah was behind the counter, and her face lit up when he walked in with a guitar. "You have come," she said. "Will you play?" "Maybe," Daniel said, sitting down at the counter. "For myself, not for show." "That's the point," she said, placing the latte in front of him. "Should I sign you up?" "Come on," he said, feeling a slight tremor, but without fanfare. "Agreed," Sarah said, smiling. "You are 5th. The cafe was half full locals, a couple of tourists, a few familiar faces from the store. The host, a guy named Jack, announced the speakers. Daniel watched people sing, read poetry, and play. No one expected perfection, and that was reassuring. When Jack called his name, he walked up to the microphone, holding his guitar. "Hi," he said, feeling his voice tremble. "I'm Daniel. I'll play something on my own. Nothing special." He began to play the melody he had been composing. His fingers were confused at first, but he found a rhythm. He did not look at the audience. He played for himself, as if on the porch. When I finished, there was applause, not loud, but sincere. He smiled, feeling warm inside. "Cool," Jack said as he returned to the counter. "Will you come back again?" "Maybe," Daniel replied. "Thank you." Sarah winked. "I told you it would be fun." "Yeah," he said, finishing his coffee. "Not so scary." He returned home and wrote in his notebook. Played on the microphone. "For myself, it was right." At his next carpentry class, he finished the table. Paul helped assemble it, checking the fastenings. "Great job," Paul said, patting him on the shoulder. "Will you put it in the cottage?" "Yeah," Daniel replied. "This is for me." "Be proud," Paul said. "You made it yourself." Daniel brought the table home and placed it in the living room. He ran his hand over the smooth surface, feeling satisfied. It was his like the guitar, like the runs, like Elsewood. He wrote in his notebook, "The table is ready. I played for myself. I live." Mark called on Sunday as usual. "Dan, are you already a carpenter there?" he asked, laughing. "Almost," Daniel answered, sitting on the porch. "I made a table, played in a cafe." "Seriously," said Mark. "Are you the star of Elsewood now?" "Huh, I don't think so," Daniel said. "Just for myself." "That's cool, brother," Mark said. "Live your life. I'll come and check your desk." "I'm waiting," Daniel said, smiling. Daniel walked along the rocky shore of Elsewood, feeling the small stones crunch under his boots. The sun was sinking to the horizon, and the sky above the sea was clear, with rare clouds. It was early June, and the air smelled of salt and grass. He had lived in Elsewood for 3 months, and this evening ritual of walking along the water had become a part of his life, like morning runs, carpentry, or playing the guitar. He didn't look for anything special in this. He just walked, listened to the waves, and breathed. The cottage he had rented was left behind, its wooden roof barely visible through the trees. There was a notepad in his pocket, but he didn't take it out. The last entries were about a carpentry group where he made a table and an open mic where he played his own tune. Claire had not written since he left Philadelphia, and her silence no longer bothered her. He knew that the divorce was finalized. Karen had sent confirmation from the court 2 weeks ago. Claire kept the house, the assets were divided, and he was free. He stopped, looking at the water. The waves crashed softly against the rocks, and he remembered her words overheard at the barbecue. "I don't love him anymore. That's it." Then they cut like a knife, but now they seemed distant, almost alien. He didn't hate her, he wasn't angry. She made her choice, and he made his. He mentally replied, "You're finished, and I'm just getting started." A smile flashed on his face, and he moved on. Yesterday, Sarah, the barista from the cafe, talked him into playing at an open mic again. He came with a guitar, feeling more confident than the first time. "Okay, rock star," Sarah said, placing the latte in front of him. "What will you play?" "Same," Daniel replied, smiling. "Your own melody. Nothing new." "The main thing is that it's yours," she said. "Go, Jack is already calling." He went to the microphone and nodded to the small audience, about 20 people, locals, and a couple of tourists. "Hello," he said. "I'm Daniel. I'll play something on my own." He played a tune that he had been composing for months. His fingers moved easily, and he did not look into the hall. He played for himself, as if on the porch. When he finished, the applause was warm, and he felt a slight warmth inside. "Cool," said Jack, the host, as he returned to the counter. "Are you our regular now?" "We'll see," Daniel replied, laughing. "No pressure." "No pressure," Jack said, raising his hands. "Just come." Sarah winked. "I told you you'll like it." "Yeah," he said, finishing his coffee. "Thank you for dragging me." He wrote in his notebook, "Played again. For myself. This is mine." Now, as he walked along the beach, he thought about how these small moments, music, carpentry, conversations with Sarah or Paul from the carpentry group, became his life. Not loud, not showy, but real. He remembered Mark's call last week. Mark, as always, was joking. "Dan, have you grown a beard there yet?" he asked, laughing. "Or do you catch fish?" "Neither," Daniel answered, sitting on the porch. "I work, I run, I make a table." "Table?" said Mark. "Dude, you're a real master. When to come and see?" "Whenever you want," Daniel said. "The door is open." "Seriously?" said Mark. "Maybe next week. I'll check out your Elsewood." "I'm waiting," Daniel said, smiling. "Bring beer." "I can do that," said Mark. "Hang in there, brother." "I'm holding on," Daniel replied. He hung up and wrote on his notepad, "Mark will come. Life goes on." Now on the shore, he thought about how far he had come from Philadelphia, from the house where Claire had said she was empty. He was not a different person. He was not reborn, as in books or films. He was the same Daniel, quiet, methodical, but now he felt whole, present. He knew who he was, and that was enough. He stopped, picked up a flat stone, and threw it into the water. The stone jumped once, twice, 3 times before sinking. He smiled, remembering how he did this as a child with his father. Everything had been simple then, and now, in Elsewood, he found that simplicity again. He did not look for big victories, did not make plans for the future. He lived day after day, step by step. In the carpentry group, he started a new project, a toolbox. Paul, the instructor, complimented his table when he showed the photo. "Strong," Paul said, looking at the phone screen. "You're a quick learner, Dan." "I'm trying," Daniel replied. "Now I want a box. For tools." "Good idea," said Paul. "Start with the drawing. If anything, I'll help." "Thank you," Daniel said. He worked on the box, feeling his hands find a rhythm. Ted, the guy from the group, came closer. "Look, master," he said, nodding at the boards. "Soon you'll outshine us all." "Ha, hardly," answered de Tenderncias, sitting down, smiling. I just like it. That's the main thing, Ted said. Do your thing, and everything will be fine. Daniel nodded, feeling that these simple words, do your own thing, had become his mantra. He wrote in his notebook, working on the box, I'm doing my own thing. Everything was going smoothly at work. Linda, his boss, was pleased. Dan, you fit in, she said, entering his small office. Clients praise your reports. Thank you, Daniel replied. I try to keep my mark. That's right, Linda said. If anything, speak up. We don't bite here. Okay, he said, smiling. He wrote in his notebook, work is underway. Linda is happy. I'm there. Now, standing on the shore, he thought about how Elsewood had become his home. People Sarah, Paul, Ted, even Marge from the store didn't get into my soul, but they were nearby. He was not looking for intimacy, but their simple conversations, their smiles gave him the feeling that he was not alone. He didn't want romance, didn't want to replace Claire. He wanted to be himself, and that was enough. He remembered her last letter, which arrived a week ago. It was short. Dan, I'm selling my house. I want to start again. Hope you're okay. He read but did not answer. He didn't feel angry, didn't feel pain. She did hers, he did his. He wrote in his notebook, Claire is selling her house. Her choice, I live. He reached the edge of the shore, where the stones turned into sand. The sunset turned the water golden, and he paused, looking at the horizon. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't anything new. He was Daniel, a man who runs, makes, plays, breathes. He thought about her words, I'm done. And again he answered in his thoughts, I'm just getting started. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.